Welcome in. It's the lawyer you know, talking more about the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie case. As breaking news has come down today that they have actually found some, and it's very vague terms that they're using, articles, items of interest is what they called them. Some said articles of clothing, personal belongings. There are all sorts of vague terminology that they're being used for what exactly has been found today. Now, there's a lot we don't know, but there's also a lot we know from a lot of the reporting that's going on. What we don't know is what exactly they have found and what it means for the investigation. But what we do know is they found something, according to the person that seems like the number one news tipper or tip off to the media, which is the Laundrie family lawyer, who has apparently texted in that after a brief search, after they reopened the park just now, that's been closed this whole time because they've been searching for Brian Laundrie, that park has been reopened. And after a brief search by his parents, the Laundrie parents have actually found some articles. They don't say articles of clothing in a lot of the reporting. They don't say exactly what they are. They say articles belonging to Brian near some of the trails he was known to have frequented. So that is what the breaking news is. Now, there's a lot of other things being reported that cannot necessarily be confirmed or denied. This video is going to be really interactive. I'm going to look at the chat much earlier on than when I usually do in these videos because there's not a ton to explain in the beginning. But I do want to talk about a couple things. There have been some reports that human remains have been found, other reports that don't mention that. But what we do know is that what they call the cadaver dog, the medical examiner, and 2 spotters have been out to that scene. And in most cases, you wouldn't have a cadaver dog and a medical examiner go out if there weren't human remains or a body found. Because what would be their purpose? They're not investigators. They're not a search party. They're not going to help you find something specifically. Now, the cadaver dog could, but the medical examiner would not go out and be part of a search. They would be there just to see what they could find out about that body or the remains, again, if they just found some blood or DNA or something somewhere, and they could just be looking at the articles to take DNA off of them. We don't know exactly whether or not that's occurred. We also don't know if the Laundrie family has provided DNA to the FBI. My guess would be yes. It's definitely been requested, but we don't know yet. The next thing is at 4:30 or around 4:30, there's supposed to be a press conference. We don't know exactly what's going to happen at that press conference, but we're going to try to share the screen and watch it live together if we can get that press conference and the sound and everything working at the same time while going live. So we can watch it together. We can try to discuss what we think it means, what we think it doesn't mean. There's been a lot of discussion. If they did find a body, if they did find Brian, what are the chances that it is a self-inflicted death, meaning suicide? And most of the reports are from most of the experts that if you're a survivalist, if you're in a park like this, you're not in the Amazon, you're not in a rainforest, you're not in the kind of environment that is so harsh where we watch these reality survivalist shows where they actually could die at any second from a bite or from starvation or from the heat or from the cold or for whatever. When you're in a park in Florida in September and October, you're unlikely to die from the elements. So if they do find his body and he is dead, then they would speculate that it's either suicide, meaning self-inflicted, or maybe somebody found Brian Laundrie and did something to him. So again, we don't know if it's him. We don't know if there's a body or just human remains, meaning DNA, something like that they found, which could be the case. Should be some announcement at 4:30. We're going to be following along with it. So hopefully we can get some information before then. But as we're going to talk now, we're just going to talk about some of the facts that we know. We'll speculate a little bit about what it could mean or how the legal process would take place, how the investigation would take place, if this, if that. So we'll get a little conjecture here and a little speculation here, but we'll answer what this could mean. So if then kind of discussion here throughout the chat. If you guys have any questions, if you've seen some reporting that said one thing or the other, this is all coming fast and furious from a bunch of different sources. So give me what you're finding and we can kind of discuss it as a group here in the chat and in the video. So let's see. if this is Brian, if they have found his body, does that mean that Abby will not get justice? Does that mean Gabby will not get justice? Okay, so this is pretty easy. It depends on what your definition of justice is. If you are the type of person that needs a public trial and conviction and death penalty or whatever it may be as the penalty phase, then yes, if they find his dead body, then she's not going to get that kind of justice. But if the end game was an eye for an eye, some people would consider this justice. If he had to have a run like a fugitive the last few months of his life, some people would consider that justice. So it really depends on what your definition of justice is. But thank you, Richard Russell, for the question. Bunny L. Bowski. Thanks for the live stream. Your insight is great. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody being here too. Get in the chat and ask me your questions so that we can have a good discussion here. Badger life, death is justice. So we know where Badger stands on that. So this was a good question somebody had. The parents probably planted the stuff yesterday. There's two ways to look at the fact that the parents found these items of interest. The way number one to look at it is, see, they were telling the truth the whole time. They didn't point law enforcement in the wrong direction. Brian was in this park. They just didn't happen to find him. But what the parents gave them was correct and true information, and they have committed no crimes. It can show that. They said, this is where we think he went. This is where he frequented. Look, we found items of interest. Or, as Bunny Lebowski says, Bunny Lebowski, sorry. It's hard to read these names that are all together. Bunny Lebowski. Or it could be that the parents, while they're just happen to be doing a brief search after the park opens up, they find these items of articles of clothing or items of interest, and they say, hey, look what we found. But they actually planted them there to keep the cops off of his scent, which could be why the cadaver dog and the medical examiner are there to try and test to see if that DNA is in fact Brian Laundrie's and how long it's been there. Is this DNA from 6 months ago? Is it from 6 days ago? Because that's going to make a big difference as to what the parents' involvement in finding these items of interest actually is. So good question. Hello, Justice Don't Sleep. Hello, Star Bell. Justice Don't Sleep. I don't even know what the headline is, so sorry that it wasn't a good one. So Priscilla Pie is saying that, yes, she's hearing everywhere that remains were found. Some people have speculated all sorts of things, like, did Brian kill somebody and steal their car? You know, the conspiracy theorists are coming out of the woodwork, no pun intended, to talk about this. And, you know, to me, human remains are different from a body. Could be blood. It could be lots of different things. It could be parts of a body. So this doesn't necessarily mean a full body was found, but it could. And hopefully we find out at 4:30. Lucky, hello. This is interesting. I agree. All right, let's see. So Priscilla thinks he offed himself. She was hoping for a trial and serving life in prison. This is always a good question. What do you think is worse for a person? The death penalty or serving life in prison without parole? Knowing those four walls are all you're going to look at for the rest of your life every single day. To me, that's always an interesting debate, is what is actually a worse punishment for a criminal defendant? And if you're not sure just by thinking about it, one of the good ways to think about it is, if you were the defendant, which would you rather? Life in prison or the death penalty? Another question, Priscilla, do you think the parents knew the whole time? This is going to be a question that's going to be nearly impossible to answer unless Brian rats them out, basically, or unless they do find that they did plant these items. So Q sent me, what happens if it is a murder-suicide? So in this case and in this situation, there's probably not enough evidence to show that without Brian Laundrie, without more evidence, that this was actually a murder that he committed, right? They may find his DNA on her. They may find some things that indicate that, but I think it would be very difficult to prove a murder if this was, in fact, a suicide. But if they do have all that evidence and have all that documentation, they can share it with the public. There's not going to be a trial. There's not going to be a conviction. Frankly, even when there is a lot of evidence and it's the middle of the trial and a defendant commits suicide or disappears, and is dead or whatever it may be, if they disappear, actually, they can continue the trial without the defendant in the chair. That's actually happened before on one of my dad's cases way back when a defendant absconded in the middle of trial. But if the defendant is dead, the charges go away. And that's mostly for judicial economy, not to waste time and money throwing it after where you can't really get any positive result from it. All right, let's see. Jennifer Hayes, yes, everybody hit the like button, please, and subscribe to our page if you don't already. All right, Patrice Haley, if it turns out to be him, do you think they will pursue obstruction charges against the parents? So this just depends on what evidence they find, right? If they found that they planted these items that they found today, absolutely there's going to be obstruction charges. There's going to be all sorts of charges against them if they're planting fake evidence and pointing the cops in the wrong direction and wasting law enforcement resources. Absolutely, criminal charges can come down against them, but there has to actually be evidence of that. If he is found dead by suicide by any form or any mode or reason or way of death in this park and they find his body today, it's going to be hard for them to show the parents obstructed justice, aided in any criminal because he hasn't been convicted of anything. That's going to be very difficult to charge if they find his body today, unless there's a lot more evidence. I apologize for the picture quality. I'm doing it on my computer so that if the press conference comes, I can share my screen. Usually I'll do it on my iPad or something with a better camera. So I apologize. It's just my webcam that I use for depositions and other things while using my computer. So I apologize if the picture or sound quality is not the best. So Scott P., can you comment on Florida and the death penalty? Sure. I don't know what you want my comment to be, but it is a thing in Florida. The way it happens is you're tried and convicted first. That's phase one. Phase two of the trial is the penalty phase, and they're able to bring out more aggravating evidence or mitigating evidence, depending on what side, and try to determine whether or not the death penalty will be entered against a specific defendant. And in Florida, it's interesting because every other case but a capital case or a death penalty case, the judge is actually the person that determines the sentence for the defendant. That is not the case in a death penalty case. The jury is the one that determines this penalty for the criminal defendant. So it's two phases that have to be found beyond a reasonable doubt. Seems like they're quick to impose the death penalty here. So, some people do say that about Florida, that we just impose the death penalty on way too many cases. But a lot of cases come back for not death penalty and for life instead. But, I really think it depends on the case, like the Ronnie O'Neill trial. Didn't come back with the death penalty. So, and I think a lot of people were surprised at that with how bad of a case that is. And I think we know what the judge would have done based on what they said. So there's lots of cases that the death penalty is charged, but it doesn't actually end up happening. So some people say it is quick, but there is a process. Just because the state brings the death penalty doesn't mean that defendant is going to get it. So Lorraine Donisi, if the remains are his, is the case closed? So not necessarily is the case closed, but there's not going to be any criminal prosecution of him. There's not going to be any conviction. There's not going to be any penalty, obviously. And I think it's going to be very difficult to go against his parents for anything if he's not convicted of anything. So for all intents and purposes, not a lot will come if they are his remains. So Miss Wee Lassie, again, same question everybody's asking. If these are his remains and he's dead, no, they're not likely to bring charges. They're not going to convict him. They're not going to have a trial for a lot of reasons. Fabulous Woman, if you think life in prison is worse than death, you should read The Chamber by Robert Grisham. Good one. Good recommendation. Patricia Tona, all right, mate, life sentence way better. Would have preferred he was found alive so we could find out why. Yeah, I think most people would prefer he's found alive so they could answer a lot of questions and have this case, fully vetted and prosecuted. Okay, and then Joan, exactly the opposite of what we just said. She hopes Brian's found deceased for closure in the case. Would it be closure? That's the real question. All right. Let's see what else. Patricia Tona, could Gabby's parents bring civil charges against Laundrie's parents? Yes, they can, because the answer most of the time is, can somebody sue somebody else? Usually is yes. Will they be successful? Could be a different answer. They have to, again, prove that what they did affected the situation. And from my opinion, so the only charge they may have is negligent infliction of emotional distress, or even intentional infliction of emotional distress if they intentionally lied because they caused additional distress and mental anguish to Gabby's family. None of the charges or none of the things that happened to Gabby, like her death, there couldn't be a wrongful death case brought against the parents just because they pointed cops in the wrong direction, lied, didn't tell where his whereabouts were, helped him escape. None of those things that they're convicted of. I'm just saying, even if they did those things, they did not cause the death of Gabby, because as we know now, she was dead before Brian came to the parents' house, excuse me, based on the coroner's report. So they wouldn't be able to really bring a civil lawsuit for a wrongful death for Gabby, but there could be something for inflicting the emotional distress by lying, withholding, things that could have helped them or made the process easier, helped them get closure sooner. I don't feel like it's a strong case, but potentially they could bring a civil lawsuit. Patricia Blue, good enough for deposition, good enough for the two. Good. You'd be surprised, right? We have wrongful death, huge cases. We do depositions with this. We get on YouTube and everybody complains about it. I don't do it on purpose. I wish it was better. I mean, it works really great for depositions. It can record. It can do all sorts of stuff that I need it to do. So that's the camera I have. All right. Well World TV, if it is him, they will release all documents on Gabby's case, and then the Petito family will come after him. So it's a question. So I already talked about the Petito family coming after the Laundrie civilly. Will they release all the documents on Gabby's case? So they'll release anything that's public record that the media wants and orders and will report on. They don't necessarily have to release everything, and they really might not produce all of the same documents or evidence if he is dead and there's not a criminal prosecution. They may not produce as many things as we're used to in these kind of true crime cases. All right, let's see. So, Scott P., do you think Gabby's estate will bring claims here? Maybe crappy parents write a book. I don't know which crappy parents you're talking about, but the estate could bring claims for wrongful death against Brian. So if Brian has an estate or has any money, they could bring claims there. Some other people said against some kind of law enforcement, maybe the ones that didn't break them up properly with the domestic violence dispute. Maybe there was something wrong in the investigation, but that didn't cause her death. So I think that's kind of a stretch. But yeah, I mean, her estate could bring claims for wrongful death if they had viable claims. So Shalon Flores, wouldn't the fact that they knew he was home without her for 10 days and said nothing be a basis for negligent infliction of emotional distress? Negligent infliction of emotional distress is actually a very difficult claim to prove. Even sometimes intentional infliction is difficult to prove. And there has to be real treatment and real proof of the emotional distress that you found, not just you saying it. There's actually something going on right now with Vanessa Bryant, Kobe Bryant's wife, that she brought this claim for the people that were taking pictures of the bodies at the plane crash or the helicopter crash where Kobe and his daughter died. And she filed a claim for this infliction of emotional distress. And then there was this whole thing where they can't believe they're being so intrusive to make her go through this psychiatric examination or psychological examination. It's very normal in a lot of cases when you claim things like this. You have to have proof of things like this. And this on its own might not be enough. But that's if you try it by a jury. And if you as a juror think that it is enough, then theoretically it could. That's going to be a question for the jury. A jury question is what we call that. That's a fact that someone other than a judge would have to determine. Patrice Haley, for Florida, for negligence in Florida, NEID, for example, which is negligent infliction of emotional distress, do y'all break causation down into two-pronged tests? So actual factual cause and legal proximate cause. Causation may be difficult based on the evidence I've seen. So it's not broken down. It just has to be the legal cause. So the legal cause has to be their negligence. And there are certain situations where it actually has to be foreseeable. That in this case, I mean, theoretically it would, they can foresee how not giving this information or saying where Brian is would cause emotional distress to Gabby's parents. So it could, I think theoretically they could have some kind of thing there, but it's kind of known as from lawyers as kind of a catch-all when you don't really have what you need for a civil cause of action. Okay, so Scott P was talking about Brian's parents, not Gabby's parents. So Spooky Boo, what do you think they've found using your experience? I really don't know. I mean, if I was going to guess, I would say articles of clothing, maybe he changed clothes there or left something there, a sock, whatever, and DNA. I don't think they found a body. I think they would have made that more clear if they actually found a body. I also think that they may tell us sooner rather than later if they think it's Brian Laundrie's body. I don't think they're going to really keep that from us or save that from us. Or hide it necessarily from us being the media. But I don't really know what they've found because they're being so vague about it. You know, they're saying articles, not saying articles of clothing. Some of them are because they're just finishing that sentence, but the lawyer in his text didn't say article of clothing. So I do think they found some things at Brian Laundrie. I think there's some DNA there. I don't think they found his body if I was going to guess. So New Wave Nan. Can they make Bertolino, who's the Laundrie family lawyer attorney, talk now and tell us everything he knows if Brian is dead? This is kind of a two-part question. No, they can't just make him talk and make him break client confidentiality. If he knows Brian is dead, he may say that. He doesn't have to tell the media anything. So they can't really force him to talk at this point. And I don't know who they is. The media can't make him talk. He seems like he's just texting them all the time. Law enforcement could make him talk if they think he knows something about a future crime that's going to happen or if he aided in a crime that happened. Jay, whoa, this is a better show since we have a lawyer answering questions. Appreciate it, man. Make sure you subscribe. We do this all the time on these cases that are going on in the news. Try to jump on live and answer questions. We actually try to get to like almost every question that's reasonable in our other videos in the comments. And sometimes there are hundreds of them. And we really try to get all, because that's the point of our channel, is to share our legal knowledge and angles with you guys. We like talking to people that'll be potential jurors on cases, explain the process. You know what your rights are in everyday life, and give a lawyer's point of view so that if you're sitting and watching these true crime things, you'll also know what a lawyer thinks throughout the process. I'm getting some text about where the press conference will be potentially. So I'm looking for a link here for that press conference. So would it be likely or possible for Petito or Laundrie parents to sue Northport Police Department for lack of competency or something of that nature? Very difficult. Very difficult. So there are some cases where if they totally botch an investigation or a high-speed chase gone wrong, causing injury, that you can have a claim against the police department. But during an investigation like this, especially if parents are withholding information from them, it's very difficult to be successful in suing a police department. So let me see here. All right, so I've been given a link to press conference. Let's bring it up here. All right, so I'm going to get it set up so we're ready to go at 4:30. Ashley Morgan, yes, the coroner is there. So doesn't that tell us they found remains? Yes, and that's the really interesting thing is the cadaver dog and the medical examiner are there, which would make me think they found something that they need them to be there for. As I said off the top, they're not investigators. They're not going to be there to search for the body. They're not doing a lot of that. But what they are there is to investigate human remains and see exactly what or whose they are. But that can be something as small as some blood splatter or all the way up to a body. So we don't really know what that is. Hey, Southern Sass, anything new just getting here? Yeah, so articles or things of interest, items of interest were found belonging to Brian Laundrie near where he frequented by his parents. And there's also been some reports of human remains and the medical examiner and cadaver dogs there. We don't know what those human remains are. Scott P, as a busy lawyer, how do you have time to do this show? That being said, we appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I fit it in when I have time. I had some time today, so I jumped on. We do some of these trials and we break down what's happening in the trials. Some people expect us to read every single word of a transcript. We don't have time for that because we are real lawyers, full caseloads. But we get a lot. We do read some of the transcripts. We watch some of the trials as we work or at night. We read some of the transcripts at night. Most of the videos are done first thing in the morning. Before we really start our day, and then they're posted later or whenever they get edited. So we really fill in any breaks that we have doing videos, breaking down and talking about content that you guys are interested in. The lives are the hardest part to fit in when we have time. I was actually supposed to be gone already today because I had this last hour blocked off because I've got an event I'm going to tonight, but I decided to jump on here real quick just for a little bit of time to talk about this because it's really interesting and I love hearing what you guys have to say about it. Jay, do you personally find this suspicious that Laundrie's lawyer released the findings today? I don't understand why he keeps texting things in, and he's giving in writing things to the media that could potentially be used against his clients. That's always surprising to me. But he's been doing it the entire case, so I find it. I don't know if I'd say suspicious, but not what I would do. So Stacy B, could the protesters at the Laundrie home be charged with anything? So this is interesting. Protesters can cross a line if they cause physical injury, if they start touching or damaging any of the belongings of the Laundries. I heard there was some craziness at a grocery store where they're going through their stuff. That they could have some criminal charges, but again, those are difficult to prosecute. Lots of times law enforcement does not want to prosecute them. The DA does not want to charge them and try to convict them when they're out there doing something they believe in or think is good. So I don't know. Theoretically they could, but it's not likely to be successful. So Well World TV, if the Laundries are litigious, meaning like to file a lot of lawsuits, could they have a case against the Wyoming coroner with his previous history of domestic violence and commentary and her autopsy findings? Not likely. Again, that's not something. There's a lot of sovereign immunity and things that protect law enforcement and government officials from what they say and do a lot of times, as bad as that may sound. All right, so it is 1 minute till. Let me see if I can share this screen. Alana Johnson, good morning. Glad you could join us. All right, cross your fingers. All right, so I think I'm sharing it with the sound. Let's test this out. Can you guys hear them? Let me know in the chat if you can hear this screen that I'm sharing.
we are not going to find out everything while the FBI knows. They're going to keep some information, perhaps most information, close to the vest. But they got to call this press conference here for a very specific reason, and we're about to find out what that reason is.
And, keep in mind, they're going to keep information close to the vest, but it is very possible that they...
All right, so it is working. I'll turn it up. Some people said barely. I hope it's coming through the computer because we've had this issue in the past. But can you still hear me talking? Only barely. All right, let's try it again and see if we can get it better.
That's all they have. Obviously, no forensic study on these remains.
Is that any better?
Gabby Petito's remains were found. It was, I believe, another day or so. That was on the 19th that the news conference was held. That the remains were found.
Okay, so we turned up the volume and that works. Okay, good. All right. So once somebody comes to the screen and actually starts talking, I'll make it bigger on my screen and we'll listen into them. All right, but there was a good question. So Well World TV, is it true Florida releases more public records than most states in legal issues? It seems like it, but I don't have a lot to compare it to. I think the studies do show that we do. We have a sunshine law that allows us to access public records, which I think is awesome. I think most stuff should be public, and there's a process and procedure to get it. And the way that you get it in Florida seems to be easier. More things seem to be subject to a public records request. So I think it's a good thing. But yes, it seems like it does happen a lot in Florida. We've got some people showing up here. All right. So, it's the same FBI spokesperson from one of the other ones. So let's get it on.
Thank you for your continued diligence on this story, and thanks for your patience. As you know, the Northport Police Department has worked collaboratively with the FBI throughout this investigation. Special Agent Michael McPherson is going to make a prepared statement. There's not going to be any questions today, but hopefully it answers some of them. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael McPherson. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the FBI Tampa Division. As you're aware, the FBI and the Northport Police Department and our state and local law enforcement partners have been searching the area of the Carlton Reserve for Brian Laundrie, a person of interest in the murder of Gabby Petito. Earlier today, investigators found what appears to be human remains, along with personal items such as a backpack and notebook belonging to Brian Laundrie. These items were found in an area that up until recently have been underwater. Our evidence response team is on scene using all available forensic resources to process the area. It's likely the team will be on scene for several days. I know you have a lot of questions, but we don't have all the answers yet. We are working diligently to get those answers for you. We are grateful for the dedication and professionalism of the Northport Police Department, along with our partners from the state and local agencies. Complex investigations such as this cannot be accomplished by one agency alone, but there are just too many agencies to name them all here today. Portions of the Myakkahatchee Creek Environment Park and Carlton Reserve will remain closed to the public until further notice. This is an active and ongoing investigation, so we ask the public to maintain distance from any law enforcement personnel, equipment, vehicles, and other related activity for the safety of the public and to protect the integrity of our work. We have no additional comment related to today's activities. Our FBI Denver office is the lead investigative agency, and all future inquiries should be directed to them. We appreciate the tremendous support from the public and continue to ask for your assistance in bringing this investigation to close. Thank you.
The backpack found near the
Justice for Gabby! Justice for Gabby! Justice for Gabby! Justice for Gabby! Justice for Gabby!
All right, so let's see here. I'll leave it on the screen for a minute just so we can see if anybody else comes on. So a couple interesting things. So yeah, Q sent me, says nothing burger, pretty much, but there are a few things that's kind of distracting. So let me just stop sharing here. So a couple really interesting things to me. First, where they found all the stuff was underwater before, which lets us know why they didn't find it until now. Okay. With some of the people saying maybe the Laundrie parents planted it there. Maybe that can tell us that they didn't actually do it. It was underwater. They could tell it was underwater. Again, these are things you can find out. You can tell if somebody just dropped a backpack or a shirt on the ground, or if it had been there for days and it was underwater. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, they did not answer any questions. That hasn't happened a lot in these press conferences. Usually they're answering a lot of questions and they've been really forthcoming. So that was interesting to me. That tells me they don't really know much yet. And what they have has not given them a lot of solid info or evidence that they can use or are confident in at this point. Another thing we heard from the background, somebody screamed, was the backpack found near the body? So maybe we now know it was a backpack, not just clothes or other things. And if it's his backpack, to me, that's a big difference than a sock or a shirt or something that he could have left and, behind and just continued on. If he left his backpack with everything in it that he was planning on using during his, survival out in the wilderness, that's more of an indication that it may be his body and he may not be alive still because he doesn't have what he needs to continue to survive. So all those things are little nuggets that can be pulled out just by what he said a little bit. And the fact they're not answering questions, you can learn a little bit from that. Additionally, confirmed human remains were found near his items of interest. And he said this investigation is going to continue for days. So it's not just, okay, obviously this is Brian Laundrie, we can move on, the investigation's over. And any human remains that have been underwater for days or weeks, obviously is a lot more difficult to determine exactly what, how, why, and when something happened. So that could indicate also why this is going to take days to continue this investigation. And agreed, he asked for them to kind of give some space to law enforcement, to anybody that's there or sees law enforcement there, because as you guys mentioned with the protesters and things like that, it's been kind of a problem. And they're screaming justice for Gabby in the press conference. So they just need space to work. They appreciate the media, but they need space to work. All right. Let's see. Okay, so Rodney Williams, big chance the articles they found could be old due to Brian hanging out there before. That's true. That's the whole point. His parents said these are areas he frequented, so maybe it's an old backpack or shirt or something. Let's see here. Priscilla, that's it. Q sent me a big nothing burger. For the most part, yeah, they couldn't. Here's what's good, right? Because before now, a lot of what I've been seeing is other reports, secondhand stuff. So with the FBI actually coming out and confirming they found items of interest and human remains, and they're doing an investigation during in a part that was underwater before, so they weren't able to do the full investigation there before. We do learn something from that, and it is confirmed. A lot of people don't find that important these days, confirming things that we think and believe or that have been reported to us. So I appreciate the confirmation by the FBI of what exactly they found. Yes, Miss Wielasi, he did mention that. Case is closed, Well World TV. I'm not sure what you mean. It sounds like you may be responding to something I said. Case is definitely not closed. Open investigation going to continue. All right, let's see. So Claire Morrison with the remains, is it enough to establish cause of death? Usually, but not always. We'll have to see with Gabby Petito's situation. It was enough to determine cause of death. Hello, Kathy. So it doesn't seem like they've confirmed that they've found him yet. All they've confirmed is they found items of interest and human remains in an area that he used to frequent. So Elska Cave, a human body left outside in the elements in Florida. Good luck to the medical examiner, especially underwater. So we'll see. Oh, sorry, Well World, if it was hard to hear. No, yeah, he didn't say case closed. Nobody has said case closed at this point. Hello, Charlie. All right, so I've got about maybe 5 minutes left. So if you guys have any more questions, here's something I wanted to add, which could have been fun if we had more time. They said no questions at that press conference. What questions would you have wanted to ask the FBI after finding out these facts? What are some of the questions you would ask the FBI? I'm going to give about a minute or two for you guys to start putting the questions in here. Then I'll read some of them out loud before we end the video today. It's been fun. It's been interesting. Press conference wasn't as interesting as we had hoped, and we didn't learn as much as we hoped, but we got to watch it together. All right, Faber, following from Northern Ireland, when will we know if they are definitely Brian Laundrie's remains? He said it's going to be days, and they're not even answering any questions yet. And we saw how long it took for Gabby Petito's, entire report to come out. So I don't expect it to be instant. I think if they knew it was Brian Laundrie, they would tell us. Could be wrong about that. I'm just guessing. But Sylvia Durham, just want to say thank you. I don't know if that's to me or to the FBI for what they're doing, but if it's to me, you're welcome. I love doing it, so no big deal. If it's to them, I agree. They're working hard and trying to get the answers and trying to close this case. Okay, so Miss Wee last, he said he thinks the agent said until the case is closed. It may have. Yeah, Blind Mother F. What remains did they find? Great question. So my gut feeling about the remains so this is something that's interesting, just how it can affect people, right? Prior to this, I would have guessed blood, something, nothing huge. After watching this, it does kind of sound like they found a body. So now I kind of do think it's a body. We'll see whose it is. Tia Maria Smith, could they at least tell if it was a white male? That would also be a good question. Q sent me, was there anything in the backpack, notes in the notebook? Good question as well. Thank you, Sylvia, to me. Awesome. Thank you. Good question. So, World, how close was he to the car park? Sounds like a fairly immediate demise if close, like reported. Yeah, that's a good question. If it was one of the first spots that his parents looked after a brief search, as their lawyer said, and they found the body right there in a place where he frequented, then maybe he didn't make it that far. Maybe he didn't last that long. There was a lot of rain during that period, if you remember back. So it could have been underwater. I don't know. It's a good question. Any tattoos on the body? Melissa McKay would ask. Rodney Williams would ask, what's in the bag? What was holding it down under the water? Great question, because if it was empty, it would be floating, right? So there could be some climbing stuff, some food, notebooks would drag it down to the bottom. How do they know it belonged to him? Well, it sounds like the parents said that this was Brian's bag, and maybe once looking inside, they could tell it was his. All right. So I think that's all we've got for today's live. This was kind of a spontaneous, not a lot prepared for it. I wanted to see what you guys thought of all the breaking news coming down. Thought the FBI would give us a little bit more in this press conference, so I wanted to get in and talk before the press conference and then react a little bit after. Hopefully we'll find out more soon, as they are going back into this area that was underwater, doing more of an investigation after finding items of interest and human remains. So make sure you hit subscribe so you can follow along with us on this journey. We're going to continue to talk about this, continue to answer questions, continue to have dialogue back and forth with everybody that comes on here and gets in the chat. Make sure you like this video so we know if the Gabby Petito content is specifically what you're interested in, so we can keep bringing you videos on this. But for now, that's all I've got. Thank you so much again for being with me on this live.